Hey nerds, what's up? Today I just wanted to get out a bonus video because I just finished Sunreach by Brandon Sanderson and Janci Patterson and just had a lot of feelings about it, and I need to talk to you guys. So today I'm going to talk about what I thought about Sunreach, which was the newest novella in the Cytoverse, or Brandon Sanderson's Skyward universe, and talk about the future of Sanderson's novellas, particularly in the Cosmere and co-authoring. So let's talk about that after the jump. Okay, so Sunreach was the first of 3 novellas that are going to be released in the next few months before the third Skyward book comes out called Cytonic. And the 3 novellas are called Sunreach, Redawn, and Evershore. So I kind of forgot Sunreach was coming out. I saw Brandon Sanderson post about it. I bought it that day, read it in a couple days. I just jumped right into it. And because of that, I sort of forgot that Sanderson was co-authoring this with another author, but I knew right away because I jumped in and it was jarring. Like, the difference in writing and tone and voice was so different. After a couple pages, I was like, what is this? And then I started remembering, oh yeah, I think he's co-authoring this. Checked on the cover and said, oh yeah, I forgot. Sanderson didn't actually really write this. I thought it was obvious. To be honest, I loved the plot of Sunreach. I loved all the ideas in it. I loved exploring, the whole hyper jump thing and spending more time with our squishy slug friends. I even really liked the idea of the romance between the characters in there, and I liked the idea of FM as a central viewpoint. However, I really struggled with how it was written. I felt FM as a primary character felt very vanilla. Instead of feeling like I knew more about FM hearing from her perspective, I feel like I almost knew nothing. I felt like she could have been anybody. I don't really feel like she was given very much personality. I also struggled because I felt people I knew, like Rig and Jorgen, didn't sound or feel like the characters I knew. I personally felt like voice in particular was jarring and very different. Also, the way the romance was handled, I know that Skyward is a YA series. In fact, I was nervous to get into it, even though it was a Sanderson, because you guys know I just don't read a lot of YA, and I was pleasantly surprised that I really loved it. So it feels like it's kind of a little bit of an older YA, kind of how I think of maybe Hunger Games, or I recently read, Six of Crows and Crooked Kingdom. They don't fall too heavily on the typical YA tropes that I dislike now. They're kind of a little bit more unique. I know Hunger Games, I feel like a lot of tropes have come from Hunger Games, but that was the OG one, Whereas in this one, I felt like it fell on some tropes I really didn't like, particularly with the romance. It just felt kind of juvenile. I don't mean that in a rude way. It was just shocking because nothing about Skyward felt juvenile, but this whole sort of way the inner voice and dialogue went felt like the character was a lot younger than she was. It felt like something I was reading as middle grade, which again was very jarring for me since it's just not something I enjoy. Ultimately, Sunreach just didn't feel like a Sanderson. I know that it was his world, and I know that Sanderson is a very straightforward writer, kind of plain text, but he really weaves characters so that we deeply care about them. And that was just sort of missing. There was that Sanderson-esque piece that really felt absent from Sunreach. So I kind of started spiraling and I started feeling really worried about kind of these other novellas in the future. And so I decided to do some research to try to make myself feel better. First, I kind of wanted to dive into how much did Sanderson write of this and kind of why did he do it this way? So I kind of dug in there. I was pretty sure that Sanderson just provided the outline, if I had remembered correctly, and that Janci Patterson did all of the actual writing. And I did find a quote that kind of cleared that up a little bit. So I'm going to read the quote here, but first I have to say that Sanderson, before the part I'm going to read, was talking about the reason he decided to write 3 novellas for Skyward, and that's because the second Skyward book mostly has Spensa isolated, and we kind of got to know all these other crewmates. And Sanderson said, well, the third book I wanted to do also kind of has Spensa isolated, and I didn't want to scrap it, but I also knew people were going to want to know what was going on with the other crew members and what was going on there. So he feels like these 3 novellas are a great way to bridge the gap between those 2 books and kind of know what's going on during Cytonic with our other characters, which is a great idea. Also, Sanderson obviously doesn't have time to write that stuff, like if you see his writing schedule, which is why he kind of brought someone else on. And this is what he said. So my fix for this is to have a series of novellas from 3 different viewpoints. Janci picked the viewpoints, and I'm co-writing with Janci Patterson, a good friend of mine for many years and an excellent writer, and honestly more in touch with YA than I am, and kind of knows that genre. And I went to her and I said, hey, would you pick 3 characters that you really want to tell about from this other group and write 3 novellas that kind of progress the story so that it's one long story in 3 chunks? And she was really excited by this idea and in writing these. So from that quote, it really feels like Sanderson was really only there as an editor capacity, and he really gave Patterson a lot of freedom to do whatever she wanted, even so much as picking the viewpoint characters. And then Sanderson obviously provided kind of the info she needed to write them. So it really seems like she wrote the bulk of it, which I think is why like the style of writing was so jarring. Like I recognized it right away that it really wasn't a Sanderson written thing. But there's a lot in that quote, and so we're gonna kind of pick it apart a little bit and start with the big question: why was Janci Patterson chosen? Patterson and Sanderson met because Patterson was a former student of Sanderson's in his course that he taught at university, his writing course. The quote above addresses something that I actually suspected to be the reason that Sanderson chose Patterson even before I read that quote, was that he feels like she's very, very in touch with YA, and I wondered if Sanderson was trying to make Skyward more YA, since maybe it doesn't quite feel that way. And I looked up her big bibliography, and she does do a lot of what seems like very classic YA things. I can't really tell. She says it's YA. I can tell kind of by the covers and the descriptions of the book. He actually even says in another interview, one of the things he admires about Patterson, he said, Janci Patterson writes teen books with a lot of emotion and problems and messed up lives, trying to sort out messed up lives short books, and they are fantastic. So he really respects Patterson. He talks about how fantastic her work is all the time. He obviously thinks she's a great YA writer. He also has put in blurbs on the front of a lot of her books, which, if you know Sanderson, does not do very often at all. So he clearly believes in her writing skill and really thought she could bring more of a YA feel to his novellas. One thing that I thought was cool to find out that I did not know is that he credits Patterson as one of the main people who really helped him improve his female characters. So I'm gonna read this quote, which I find interesting. Writing believable female heroines. I should probably back up and point out that I wasn't always good at this. In fact, in the first few books I wrote before Elantris, I was terrible at it. First, I wanna say, I mentioned that in Way of King's Prime, so I feel justified that Sanderson's saying it himself here. That disconcerted me because it was something I wanted to make a strength in my writing. This is partially due to the fact that so many of my favorite fantasy novels growing up, when I first discovered fantasy, were from female writers with really strong female protagonists. So then he talks about the people who helped him, like mom, sisters, other people, but then he says this. Janci Patterson was one of the people I sat down to interview and to talk into in my quest to be able to write female characters who didn't suck. I would say specifically that Vin from Mistborn has a lot of Janci in her. He also specifically mentioned some other scenes with Vin in particular that Janci helped him on and kind of changed and improved that characterization. So much, in fact, that Patterson has a character named after her in the Mistborn trilogy. So knowing that Patterson is a personal friend of Sanderson's, Sanderson super admires her work and particularly likes that she is knowledgeable about YA and the fact that she was instrumental in helping him improve his female characters. On paper, I completely understand now why Janci Patterson was chosen for this project. She makes sense. But before I talk about that in terms of maybe changing my feelings about Sunreach, I want to talk about one other thing, which is, why is Brandon Sanderson doing this? Why is he co-authoring? Now, I know I have seen lives talking about this, and I know it's partly in the state of Sanderson, but for the life of me, I could not find the word of Brandon on this. I just finished Sunreach last night and wanted to get this video out quick, so I just didn't have the time to dig deep into word of Brandon, but just trust me, I've seen this being talked about a lot, and I know I watched it. So I'm pretty sure this is factual, even though I don't have the exact quote. Basically, Sanderson realizes he has a lot to write and there is only so much time in this world. I think it was the 2019 State of Sanderson where he started expressing that he wanted to do more co-authoring projects. He wanted to start bringing other authors in to be able to expand how much he's able to write and put them on smaller projects. Now, he's done this with smaller things like Dark One. I do feel like that's a little different though, because it was being adapted to a graphic novel, so it seemed more natural that that he would have a co-author on that since he's not like a graphic novelist. So one idea he expressed was to have co-authors on novellas, which are generally like less important than the main storylines and kind of frees him up to write his really main works, particularly in the Cosmere. And he has brought up perhaps co-authoring novellas in the Cosmere in the future. Now, to be clear, I understand why he's doing this. I understand why this is attractive. Like if we just look at our Cosmere Stormlight Archive novellas, we have Edge Dancer and Dawnshard. And these were awesome novellas simply because they gave us the context we needed for the other books. You learn a lot in both of them, a lot of details that in the main book when we found out about them might have felt sudden. Like if all of a sudden you find out what happened to the Edge Dancer, you'd be like, that seems sudden. Or what happened in Dawnshard. And so it's kind of nice that we have this separate place because those narratives would be too bulky and too much for the main Stormlight Archive. So I do like the place they have there, and I think Sanderson is probably unwilling to drop Cosmere novellas or particularly Stormlight novellas or these Skyward novellas because he feels like they add a lot to the universe and put important details without overburdening his main storyline. So I can understand why he doesn't want to just get rid of those, but he needs help accomplishing all of it. And like ultimately, Sanderson needs to write more and more and more every year based on how things are growing. So like, wouldn't it be nice to offset those? And look, I want Sanderson to be happy, okay? I want to keep him happy and writing as like one of my favorite authors. And he needs to eat, he needs to sleep, he needs to do other stuff, but like write 24/7. And I get that he needs to switch between projects to keep the writing juices flowing. And I'm already like so friggin' grateful with how much content he gives us on a yearly basis. It's just insane. So asking for more from him feels like a little selfish. Like I get why he's doing this. But let's talk about how I feel about it in my heart. As I mentioned at the beginning of this video, Sunreach was a struggle for me. I struggled with the tone of voice and I struggled that it just like didn't feel like a Sanderson. And at first it really had made me have this like visceral reaction to the idea of anybody else writing Cosmere novellas because Skyward's one thing, I really like it, but the Cosmere, that's what's like closest to my heart. So all of a sudden the idea of this happening to a Cosmere novella really like, I was on an edge, I was on a ledge. However, after I did all that research on Janci Patterson, it made me feel like I perhaps need to reserve judgment a little bit. Maybe I didn't resonate with how she wrote FM, maybe I didn't resonate with the way she wrote the romance subplot, but she has 2 other novellas from different perspectives, and maybe I need to give her a chance to kind of see what she does with it. Like this was just the first one. So maybe I need to like step back a bit and wait till this other one comes out before like giving a definite judgment. Like she's clearly qualified for the job. So I am still a little nervous that it's gonna bring the Cytoverse to a more YA feel, which is like generally not what I like. Honestly though, I just really want Brandon to write the Cosmere novellas. Like, I get that he would choose someone else for Cosmere novellas, so he would choose an adult writer, and maybe that adult writer could bring a lot to the table. I can think of some adult writers that bring interesting things, but ultimately I realized, like, Sanderson writes Sanderson the best. Like, I know we've always talked about he has a simple writing style, or maybe he isn't this compared to whoever or that, but the way he writes perfectly fits what he is writing, and Sanderson is the best at Sanderson, so it's really hard for me to want to let that go, even for Cosmere novellas. I feel like I would feel okay, I guess, with him doing like a Stormlight novella co-authoring with someone else, but definitely not like a new novella from a new world. Like if I'm gonna experience a new magic system in a new world, I need Sanderson to write it first, you know? So I don't want any like new Cosmere planets on a new author. Or maybe I just need Sanderson to take a more hands-on role, so he's not actually physically writing, which will save a lot of time, but he's more heavy-handed on the editing. I think the characters in the Cosmere, and especially Stormlight Archive, are very close to my heart, and so the idea of him giving up control as a reader is difficult. Is that selfish? Absolutely. It is selfish of me to ask that. So ultimately, like whatever he decides, I'm obviously going to be a supporter of Sanderson, but I will say so far I'm a little nervous about that, and I'll be very interested to see where that goes. Now, I may be the only one who didn't like Sunreach. We'll find out. I wouldn't be surprised. It's happened before. It's too early to tell about really what the response is since it just came out, so I'll be very interested to see how that shakes out over the next few weeks. Right now on my Instagram, it's been half and half. Some people are like, yeah, I definitely agree. It was kind of like juvenile sounding. And then the other half are like, what are you talking about? This was incredible. I freaking loved the romance. So I do wonder if it's gonna go down those lines, like perhaps readers who read a lot more YA are gonna really enjoy this and his adult readers will be more isolated, or perhaps it'll be a mix. Again, maybe I'll be the only one who was wary about it. Either way, if you've read Sunreach, I really want to know what you think of it. I want you to know what you think of this whole co-authoring project with Brandon Sanderson, particularly co-authoring of the Cosmere, since I think as Sanderson fans, that's probably the thing that means the most to us. Either way, I kind of want to know all of your feelings on this, and let me know what you thought of Sunreach. I hope you enjoyed this bonus video. I like to get this stuff out in a timely manner, so hopefully there's a lot to discuss. And as always, if you like these kind of videos, please like and subscribe. And if you want to chat with me or see other nerdy rants or what I'm currently reading, the best way to do that is on Instagram at bookborn.reviews. I'll see you next time. Bye.